All right, so I can only assume that you've watched the previous video about the intro to the PTS and you're back for more punishment. What I've done here is I've taken the PTS, the meat of it, and done basically the same treatment. So I cut all the stuff that you don't care about out, and I put it on here. And once again, this is going to be the 7,000th time you're going to hear this, but you can't just watch this video. You have to go get a physical or an electronic copy, whatever, I don't care. Get something and create notes. Just reading this is not going to allow it to stick in your brain. So what we're going to cover today is Area of Operation 1, Task A, Question 1, which is explaining certificate privileges, limitations, and currency experience requirements, medical eligibility, and pilot logbook or flight records. Now, remember back to the intro, up near the top, it says that the evaluator may change the sequence or combine tasks with similar objectives to have an orderly and efficient flow to the practical test or proficiency check events. So, what does that mean? That means that he might not ask you a question like, what are the certificate privileges and limitations of a sport pilot certificate, right? He could couch that in a scenario. Say, let's say you're flying along with a buddy, and he says, "Hey, I want to go over those mountains, and the mountains are at 11,000 feet, right? Can you actually fly over those mountains?" Well, that's probably something you should know whether or not you can do. Just like before, it's going to give you the references up here, and I've found the references for you. So for certificate privileges and limitations, that sounds like a law, doesn't it? So it's in the law. It's in Part 61, Subpart J, and the specific reference to that, 61.315. What are the privileges and limits of my sport pilot certificate? Here it is. Here's the big things. You can act as pilot in command of a light sport aircraft. You probably already knew that. You must pay at least half of the operating expenses of any flight. And then there's a whole bunch of things that you can't do. You can't fly at night, can't carry more than one passenger, etc. There are some additional restrictions, like for flying in Bravo, Charlie, and Delta airspace. You can't fly outside the United States. And here, you cannot fly at an altitude more than 10,000 feet MSL or 2,000 AGL, whichever is higher. So you, in theory, could fly over that 11,000 foot mountain, provided you stayed within 2,000 foot AGL, and that is, of course, assuming that there weren't any sort of oxygen requirements. Go through 61.315, read that, okay? That's for the sport pilot stuff. There are some additional stuff that you should know, which is in 61.317, and that's a little bit more of an administrative deal on your end, but it's kind of how your sport pilot certificate works. And then Part 43.3, and the gist of that is, as a sport pilot certificate holder, you may perform preventative maintenance on an aircraft owned or operated by you and issued a special airworthiness certificate in the light sport category. So, not going to work. Needs to have a special light sport airworthiness certificate. Next question here. What about currency experience requirements? So, exercise of privilege. 61, it has to do with the certification of pilots and instructors, and so the reference for this is 61.2. Beginning of this is basically, hey, if your certificate is no good, you can't use it. That's pretty obvious stuff, but might want to read it anyway. It starts to get important down here at B for currency. You'll be asked about currency and how to maintain currency. So no person may exercise the privileges of an airman certificate rating, endorsement, or authorization issued under this part unless that person meets the appropriate recent experience and medical requirements of this part. So basically that the law is stating that unless you follow the law, that you're breaking the law, basically. So that's good to know. Down here, 61.56, flight review except as provided in, gives you some sections. A flight review consists of a minimum of 1 hour of flight training and 1 hour of ground training. So that's cool, but do I need a flight review? Well, if you come down here to C, except as provided in paragraphs, those, no person may act as pilot in command of an aircraft unless since the beginning of the 24th calendar month before the month in which the pilot acts as pilot in command, the person has accomplished a flight review. So turns out you need one of those. A logbook endorsement, and then passed, and then there's some exceptions. So a person who has passed any of the following need not accomplish a flight review, which is pretty cool. It gives you some exceptions there. There's also some currency requirements. You need to have had 3 takeoffs and 3 landings within the preceding 90 days. This is also in Part 61, and you have to have acted as the sole manipulator of the flight controls. The last part of this is, I should mention down here, there's an advisory circular. This is 61-91 kilo, and it's on the Wings Proficiency Program. And one of the things that this advisory circular states in 7.2 is that a participating person does not need to accomplish the flight review requirements of Part 61 if, since the beginning of the 24th calendar month before the month in which the pilot acts as pilot in command, the person has satisfactorily accomplished 1 or more phases of a FAA-sponsored pilot proficiency program, which is what Wings is. So basically, Wings, each time a pilot earns a new phase of Wings, it satisfies the flight review requirements regardless of how frequently or closely spaced the phase or award. Next, medical eligibility, right? So you're in sport pilot because usually most people are doing it for medical stuff. So here's your medical eligibility here. 61.23. So operations requiring either a medical certificate or U.S. driver's license. So you've got to have one, either of those, when exercising the privileges of a sport pilot certificate in a light sport aircraft. And then here's some limitations on there. A person using a U.S. driver's license to meet the requirements of paragraph C, which would be up there at the top that we highlighted, while exercising a sport pilot privileges must, and then here's some restrictions. You gotta basically, if your driver's license has a restriction on it, you have to comply with that. Now, down here you might be worried, it says have been found eligible for the issuance of at least 3rd class airman medical certificate. But here's the important part in parentheses down here, if the person has applied for a medical certificate. So if you did apply, you need to have been found acceptable. But if you did not apply, that's okay too. Also, you need to not have had your medical revoked, and you need to not know of any reason, medical reason, that would make you unable to operate a light sport aircraft in a safe manner. Okay. Last one. Pilot logbook or flight records. Cool. We come over here. This is 6151, entitled, appropriately, Pilot Logbooks. So, and he's probably not going to ask you a ton of questions on this, exactly how things need to be logged. You can read this, right? And this is not one of those questions you're going to, need to know in an emergency situation, right? You're not going to be flying towards a thunderstorm and say, oh no, I haven't read 61.51, I'm going to die, right? That's something you can read on the ground. But the big thing here is that you need to document all the training and aeronautical experience used to meet the requirements for a certificate or rating or flight review. So basically, if you're using that time to count towards something, you have to record it, and you have to record it correctly. And so here gives you all the list of things you have to record. Pretty much any pilot logbook is going to have all these things covered for you. But in case you wanted to, you could use a sticky note or legal pad or something like that to keep your logbook. If you wanted to do that, you could do it so long as you recorded these things that this part prescribes accurately. All right, I'm out.